What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Instagram Live, and we're here on this afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, talking all about keto, and that's what we like to do here on my Instagram Live channel. And as of late, we've been doing these things that we call Jimmy Rants. So I like to pick a subject and grab that subject by the, grab that bull by the horns, and we tackle various subjects as it relates to keto. And unfortunately, there are a lot of topics that are out there that people are talking about within the realm of keto that I'm hearing some mixed information about. I'm hearing some really bad information about. So on Jimmy Rants, we're trying to correct some of the misinformation that's out there and at least offer a more balanced perspective. And when appropriate, I go in rant mode because that's kind of my jam. So today we are going to talk about, let me pin that bad boy so you guys can see. We are going to talk about how much protein am I supposed to eat on keto. I put how protein, but I meant how much protein. How much protein am I supposed to eat on keto? This is a question that people have confusion about. So before I get into the specifics about determining how much protein to eat, let's define terms. So when you talk about a ketogenic diet, the definition clinically of a ketogenic diet is one that is defined as low in carbohydrates, moderate in protein, and high in fat. And when you do those three things in the amounts that are right for you, you will produce ketone bodies. Of course, it could be argued that anything that you would do that would produce ketones is ketogenic, but that's not necessarily true either. If you have a condition called ketoacidosis, that's very high levels of ketones along with very high levels of blood sugar. That's ketones in the blood, but that's not ketogenic. You could also fast for many days. So let's say you fast for 5 to 7 days. You will ramp up your ketones very rapidly to therapeutic levels. So fasting is a good thing as compared to ketoacidosis, but that's not a ketogenic diet. So when you talk about doing a ketogenic diet, it's one that's low carb, moderate protein, and high in fat. That is the definition of keto. What has happened, though, is some people want to try to change the goalpost, so to speak, of that definition. So there's a certain segment of people that like to say that they're keto, and they like to make comments that if you're going to be keto, you need to eat less fat in your diet. You need to eat more protein in your diet. In fact, I was just talking with a gentleman on the phone. I was calling my my alma mater for my college, and they wanted some updated information for the alumni. And as I was chatting with him, the diet came up somehow. Gee, I wonder why with Jimmy Moore. But diet came up, and I was asking him about what he was doing. And he said, well, I'm doing this, this, and this. And I said, well, have you ever tried a ketogenic diet? He said, oh, I tried that, and I was so miserable and hungry, and I was irritable, and I just didn't feel right. And I said, well, what did you eat? And when he started describing his diet, he was eating low carb, but he was not eating high fat, and he was not moderating his protein. So he was eating a whole lot of protein, moderate amounts of fat, and low carb. That is a recipe for disaster for a lot of people. Some people do well on that. It tends to be kind of a bodybuilder-ish type of diet to have extremely high levels of protein, more moderate levels of fat, and very low carbohydrates. But for people that have insulin resistance, that is not a ketogenic diet. And that is not something that's going to help them thrive. And I realize not everybody has insulin resistance, but a significant portion of the population does. And so in that context, you have to know where you start to answer this question. If you're just joining us, We're doing another episode of Jimmy Rants, and in this episode, we're talking about how much protein you're supposed to eat when you're on keto. And so I'm laying the groundwork that context matters here, and that the definition of keto is one that's low carb, a diet that's low in carbs, moderate in protein, and high in fat. So then the question becomes, okay, how do you determine what moderate protein means? Well, I wrote a book about this. It's called Keto Clarity. Go check it out. And in that book, we talked about how you can do this very thing. So carbs are easy. Keep them low to your tolerance level. So how do you figure out your tolerance level? You test your blood sugar. You look at triglycerides on your cholesterol panel. That should be under 100. Your blood sugar should definitely be under control as well. And if you eat a meal and you see a huge jump in your blood sugar from eating whatever you ate carbohydrate-wise, you know that you probably ate too many of them. And so getting the carbs down is the first and foremost. And I do credit even these people that promote a higher protein, low-carb diet. I do credit them that they do stick with making sure people keep their carbs restricted. That is always going to be first and foremost. So then what do you do with the fat and the protein? So protein, we say, is moderate. So what does moderate mean? Moderate means finding that level of protein that's going to give you the benefits that you need. Because remember, protein has amino acids in it. And amino acids are essential in your diet. Meaning, if you did not eat them, you would die. And so because amino acids are essential, don't misunderstand and misrepresent when we say moderate protein to eat less than what your body needs. You need to eat what your body needs. And so getting those complete proteins, which any animal-based source of protein will be a complete protein, is going to help your body get the amino acids that you need. But here's where the controversy comes into play. If you're a bodybuilder, you could probably have a little more protein than the average person. If you're someone who's super insulin sensitive, you again are someone who can have a little more protein. If you're insulin resistant, though, it's the flip side. You need to eat a little less protein. And when I say less, I'm not meaning like next to nothing. I'm meaning adequate amount for your body. So moderate protein on a plate would look like this. So if you're insulin resistant and you're keeping your carbs to right around 20 to 30 grams a day, that's total carbohydrates. That's first and foremost. So then moderating on the protein means you want to have, for example, 5 ounces of meat. Okay? So if you have 5 ounces of meat with a little bit of green leafy vegetables, and then you add fat to that. So you would add avocado, you could add butter, you could add cheese, you could do any number of things to add fat. And the fat is only being added for flavor and satiety. You're not loading it up on the plate with gobs and gobs of fat. So the 5 ounces of steak will have natural fats in it, along with the protein. The avocado will have mostly fat. The butter will be all mostly fat. The vegetables that you consume, either the green leafy vegetables, you can put a little avocado oil on top of that. If you use like mashed cauliflower, you would be able to get carbohydrate with a little more fat in there from the cream and the butter that you would use on that. So you see where we're going here? That's what we're talking about when we say moderate down on your protein to be keto. So it's not this drastic, oh my gosh, you're starving your body of protein. You're getting adequate amounts of protein for your body. And so it's going to vary from person to person, like I said. And the more you exercise, the little more protein that you need. So you guys that have watched me on Instagram Live, you know that I've been flipping a tractor tire for a HIIT workout. Well, on the days that I did that and have been doing that, I am eating probably about 20 grams more of protein on those days. Why? Because the amino acids are being used to help build muscle, and that's a good thing. So on typical days when I'm not doing that, I am having about 80 grams of protein in my diet. On those days that I flip the tire, I'm having about 100 grams of protein. So what's that look like? So I add in on those days the equivalent of like 3 to 4 extra eggs than what I would typically eat in a day. So I think sometimes the semantics of all this gets a little bit confusing for people because people hear moderate protein and they think, oh, low protein. Nobody's talking about eating low protein except for the vegans. I hear some of those guys, they talk about, oh, you need to have 10% or less of your diet as protein. Well, of course a vegan's going to say that because it's extremely hard to get protein in on a vegan diet. And so when we're talking about moderating protein, we're looking at somewhere between like 15% of your calories up to about maybe 25% of your calories, depending on how insulin sensitive you are. So the more insulin resistant you are, here's the key. You're going to be very sensitive to carbohydrates because of the glucose effects from those carbs. But you're also going to be very sensitive to the glucose effects of protein. This is why cutting down on the amount of protein that you consume when you're insulin resistant, when you cut your carbs, is so necessary. Because that glucose that gets formed from the liver through this process called gluconeogenesis, it's harmful if you eat too much protein. And again, it's very difficult to do in the context of eating a low-carb, moderate protein, high-fat diet. It's very hard to overeat on protein unless you're eating chicken breasts. And some people say, well, what about the carnivore diet? Isn't that very high in protein? Well, yes, it has a good, considerable amount of protein, but it also has a considerable amount of fat. You look at Dr. Sean Baker, who I know watches my Jimmy Rants, and he is eating ribeye steak. Well, ribeye steak is one of the fattiest cuts of meat that you can possibly have. And if you look at the breakdown of the amount of fat that's in ribeye steaks, you're looking at about 70 to 75% fat. That's pretty darn ketogenic, even with the 25-ish, 30%-ish amount of protein, because he's not eating any carbohydrates in that diet. And I think the lesson here is restricting your carbs to your tolerance is so critical in this whole discussion. Because if you don't restrict the carbs, moderating protein or eating higher protein, it doesn't matter. You're not going to get the results you want on keto. So if you're watching this and you want to know, okay, how much protein am I supposed to eat on keto? It's all dependent on you. You know how your body responds to carbohydrates. And if it responds very negatively to higher amounts, then you need to moderate down on your protein. So that's going to take some tinkering and testing. What we put in Keto Clarity is start your body at 20 grams of carbs, total grams of carbs, just to see where your tolerance is. You might be able to go up from there. Some people might have to go down from there, but everybody can start at 20 grams. With protein, start at 80 grams of protein. Again, you might be able to go up from there. You might even have to go down from there, but start there. And then with fat, eat it to satiety. So fat's not a free-for-all. That meal that I described earlier, you didn't see or hear me talk about tons upon tons of fat on your plate. What you heard me say was complement the food that you are eating by having adequate amounts of fat around it. What that does is it gives you ample amounts of calories. It gives you ample amounts of nutrition. And here's the litmus test for how well you're doing with moderating your protein and lowering your carbs and eating fat to satiety. You will be able to go many, many, many hours between meals. That guy I was just talking to on the phone, he said, oh yeah, I would eat and then I'd have to eat again in 2 or 3 hours, and then I'd have to eat again in 2 or 3 hours after that. And I'm going, you're not doing something right. And the major something was he wasn't eating fat. And then he revealed, oh yeah, I'm having like turkey jerky. And yeah, that's the problem, dude. You're getting an overload of protein and not enough fat. And that's what sabotages a lot of people that think they're doing keto and they're not really doing keto, because again, words mean things. Keto means low carb, moderate protein, high fat. So I hope this has helped clear up a little bit of the confusion about how much protein you're supposed to eat on keto. Now I want to see what you guys have to say. Welcome in, welcome in. Hi, no t-shirt Jimmy. Yes, I'm in my hot tub, so it's kind of weird to wear a t-shirt in the hot tub, so I don't. Yay, I'm catching you live and not on the replay, Keto Neogenesis. Thank you for that. By the way, if you want to watch the replays, a lot of you are watching this on YouTube, go to jimmyrants.com, and that's where we have them. Einstein's Kitchen says, I'm very interested in this topic, but I kind of love that you're rocking a live post shirtless. I do it every afternoon, guys. Thanks. All right. I need some questions. I've lost 35 pounds, and I'm 21% body fat. I still get pretty darn hungry lots of days, sometimes almost 190 grams of fat. This concerns me as I still have a little fluff to lose, but I'm not losing. So if you're eating that much fat in your diet and you're still getting hungry, there could be a lot of things going on, but I would look at the amount of protein that you're consuming, because it's possible, I'm going to assume, Keto Neogenesis, that you're keeping your carbohydrate intake low. But I think if you lower the protein possibly a little bit, maybe that would help with that. I'm protein sensitive, so I try not to go over 60. Okay, well, it's possible at this point that you could tinker and test. And this is the brilliance of this topic, you guys. And it's one reason I wanted to bring it up. I've been misrepresented a lot online. People saying that I'm all about people eating low protein. No, I'm not. I'm about people tinkering and testing and find what works for them. So I would try, in your case, Keto Neogenesis, bumping up the protein a bit, just to see if that gives you a little more satiety, along with lowering down just slightly on that fat. So let me scroll back. You had 190 grams of fat. You're eating about 60 grams of protein and 3 grams of carbs at that. So doing quick math there, 190 grams of fat. Yeah, I think you could probably go down on the fat to maybe like 160 or 70, up your protein from like 60 to 90, and then you could actually add in a few more carbs if you wanted to, unless you're carnivore, in the form of like green leafy and non-starchy vegetables. I'd be interested to see if that helps improve your satiety. And see, this is a reason why I wanted to do this, you guys. Everybody thinks I think everybody should just like gnaw on butter all day and keep lowering and lowering and lowering protein. I just told this girl to raise her fat, or raise her protein and lower her fat. So back off. All right. So if hungry and need to eat fat instead of protein, how do I keep from being hungry? So I just helped you out on that one. Are you still flipping the tire, Russ? So Christine has been recovering from her shoulder surgery, so it's made it extremely difficult with me taking care of her and everything. I do want to get back to that, but not lately have I been doing that. Any more questions, you guys, on how much protein you're supposed to eat? Einstein's Kitchen says 20 grams of carbohydrates, 15% protein of daily caloric intake, correct? Well, that's certainly something that you could aim for. I wouldn't want to put it on a calorie percentage, because I want to make sure you're getting adequate calories. So 20 grams of carbs right there is 80 calories. So I think you want to have ample amounts of protein. So rather than a percentage, I mean, you can run the numbers after you do the actual grams, but rather than a percentage, I would do 80 grams of protein to start, and then fat to satiety. And again, fat is essential as well as the amino acids. So make sure that you're getting adequate amounts of that so that the calories are high enough so you're not slowing down your metabolism. Robert says, I've heard some vegan advocates suggest that homocysteine is elevated due to having too much protein. Dr. Terry Wall says it's elevated when B12 or folate is low. So yeah, homocysteine is a key inflammation marker in the body. You ideally want to have 7 or lower. And so it's ironic if what Dr. Walls is saying is true, that if vegan advocates are saying homocysteine is elevated because of too much protein, it's elevated when B12 or folate is low, because in vegans, B12 is very low. And what if a vegan has the MTHFR gene mutation where they have to have methylated folate? So yeah, there's a lot of questions there, but I don't believe that you necessarily see an elevation in homocysteine levels from higher amounts of protein. And here's another kind of semantical thing. What is too much protein? So I think everybody has an allotted amount of protein that's right for them. And if you stay within that range that's right for you, it's going to differ from person to person. But if you stay in that range that's right for you, are you really causing higher inflammation levels? I don't think so. But here's another point about why you should moderate protein. There are proteins in your body right now just floating around. They're proteins that need to be cleaned up. So when we talk about fasting for at least 3 days to produce this effect called autophagy, what autophagy is doing is cleaning up those old proteins. So if protein is in your body already, just floating around, why are we still feeding our body more protein? Can't your body use those proteins? And the answer is yes. And did you know too, we put this in Keto Clarity, one of my moment of clarity quote experts was Dr. Ron Rosedale. And Dr. Rosedale, I remember very vividly, said, oh yeah, the body is very efficient at recycling protein. So people think they need an obligate amount of protein in their body, but you actually use proteins over and over and over again. They get recycled in the body so that you don't need to eat as much protein. I know Dr. Rosedale, he limits his protein to somewhere around 50 to 60 grams a day. So he's super lower on the moderation side of things than even I am, because he's seeing it as a health promoting thing. He's all into the mTOR pathway and increasing longevity and improving health overall. Whereas if you're a bodybuilder, you're wanting to stimulate growth factor so that you can build muscle. That's why they advocate for more protein. So know why you're eating the protein that you're eating. Is your goal to build more and more muscle and to be a bodybuilder? Then eat more protein. If your goal is longevity and improving the mTOR pathway, then eat less protein. If you're trying to be ketogenic, you need to moderate the protein. So you kind of tinker and test and figure out what works for you. Let's see here. Keto cured me of my eating disorder. I'm so grateful for all the work you do. Keto not only helps with weight loss, it helps change your mind. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. And congratulations to you. Helene says, my lunch was 3 ounces of brisket burger, 2 ounces of avocado, 1 ounce of cheese, 1 fried egg, 2 strips of bacon, and this is my meal. That's a pretty darn good meal. So as you guys can see, that's pretty moderate in protein, because the protein sources are primarily the brisket burger, and there's a little bit of half of the cheese is protein. The egg is mostly protein, about half and half as well, and 2 strips of bacon, again half and half protein, and then the rest is mainly dietary fat. There's a nominal amounts of carbs in the avocado, and just microscopic amounts of carbs in the cheese and the egg, but that's pretty good. Good job. Olga wants to know, do you recommend a macro calculator to get a personalized fat protein allowance? No, I am not a fan of doing those calculators. I mean, obviously, if you're just starting and you're trying to figure out like where your tolerance level is and you want to see all that data, that's fine if you want to run it through kind of a Fit Day or one of those kind of apps. But I'm personally not necessarily a fan of those. The one that I really like that's pretty good because it also gives you the micronutrition along with the macronutrition is Chronometer. So go look up Chronometer, Chronometer, and it's a pretty decent one if that's something that you want to do. So what types of fat do you eat with your meals? Mama Ors wants to know. So you can eat all kinds of fats, and I think mixing them up with a mix of saturated, monounsaturated, and even polyunsaturated fats, but don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about vegetable oils. I'm not talking about the really bad polyunsaturated fats. I'm talking about the naturally occurring ones that come in nuts and seeds, and that kind of thing. Fats that are saturated tend to be like butter, coconut oil, lard, tallow, and then monounsaturated typically are like the olive oils and the avocados. All right. In June, dialed pretty tightly in on my nutrition, was eating about 120 grams of protein and 200 grams of fat, keeping carbs at around 30 or 20 or even below, and shed pounds. Felt great. Great, Russ. You found the level that works for you, and I know you work out, and so the fact that you are fueling your muscles with that extra protein, you can get away with 120 grams. Whereas someone like myself, that's probably not wise to go that high, but you found what works for you, and you figured out how much protein you're supposed to eat. Christopher says, I went on keto, lost too much weight. I was 225 down to 175. I'm 6'4", but I was eating 3 to 4 times a day. I wasn't hungry, but felt like I had to force it down. Was my protein too low? Well, number one, if you're eating 3 to 4 times a day, I don't think you were really that keto. It sounds like you might have been hypocaloric. So you weren't only too low in protein, which I have no idea. You didn't tell me how much protein you ate. But it sounds like you might have been hypocaloric. So eat more of everything. And you won't have to eat 3 to 4 times a day. And and see, this is the thing. You weren't hungry because you're eating so often. And I wonder if you allowed your body more periods of fasting between the meals that you might have seen more balanced results in that. I'm 5'3", 150 pounds. I weight train every day, and I'm also a landscaper. What do you think in regards to protein? So again, I think you need to tinker and test. And if you're already weight training, then I think you need to have a little more protein than probably most people for a woman and for the size that you are. A lot of women that are your size and your height and everything, they're going in probably around 60 to 70 grams of protein. I think you could probably start with maybe 80 to 90 grams and see how you do. And this is the thing, guys. How you determine how much protein you're supposed to have on keto is going to be a tinker and test and find what works for you. So if you start at a level and you're not seeing good results, then you need to back off on the protein. If you start at a level and you're like, I think I can handle a little more, then add in a little more incrementally, like 10 grams at a time each week, and see how you do. There's no perfect science to making sure you find what your level of protein should be. Just ordered vitamin D3 and K2. Could that be part of the missing link? Also in search of a doc for bioidentical hormones when I can afford it. Total hysterectomy in 2001. So yeah, micronutrition does play a huge role. But you can get K2 and other sources of micronutrients from eating quality sources of protein. Hello. If you're just joining us, we are talking about how much protein you're supposed to eat on keto. This is my latest Jimmy Rants. And as always, go to jimmyrants.com if you want to see past episodes. I've been eating keto for about 5 weeks. I'm not seeing the scale move much yet. I know it's not the only measuring tool. I'm in ketosis daily. How long before I make diet adjustments? So if you're eating a ketogenic diet for the purposes of weight loss, then you need to shift your thinking. I do think you can lose weight on a ketogenic diet, but the primary reason you go keto is to get healthy, and through that health, the side effect of that will be weight loss. Send me some good vibes. I've been struggling to stay committed to low carb lately. Keto Cassie JKA. Cassie, you got this, girl. You know what to do. And see, this is what I tell people pretty often. When you get stuck in a rut and you're not really sure what to do and you're like frustrated, go back to the basics. So a lot of you guys have read my book, Keto Clarity. If you've not, go get it. It's on Amazon right now. It's in a lot of Barnes & Noble stores. Go get it, because in there we simplify the language by design. I assumed that people would go keto, would get frustrated and get out in a funk, kind of like you are, Casey, and need a reminder about how to do it. So go refresh yourself on how to do this, and then get right back on it again. I think sometimes we allow our struggles to become our reality when the struggles are merely a part of the journey that you're on with keto. There's some debate over whether elevated mTOR is necessarily bad. Exactly, Robert. So that's why I think this debate over higher protein is kind of a funny one, because most of the conversation revolves around gluconeogenesis and how important that is, and a lot of it also is around this mTOR debate. So until science kind of catches up to this debate, it's just going to be one of those circular debates until science gives us an answer one way or the other. How would I know about insulin resistance? Any blood test needed? Please suggest. So Ume, I actually wrote a book with Dr. Adam Nally called The Keto Cure. It came out in April this year. And in there we have a whole chapter all about insulin resistance 101, the signs that you can see that you are insulin resistant or not. In short, if you have elevated fasting blood glucose levels, if you have elevated fasting insulin levels, if you have elevated levels of all the metabolic syndrome things like high blood pressure, you have belly fat, you have skin tags on your body. These are all telltale signs that you are insulin resistant. All right. Mixing up my protein sources, eating stuff like beef cheeks, in testing stomach, bacon, of course. That's what Russ is doing. Yeah, I think mixing up your proteins is probably never a bad idea. And this is the other kind of missing element in this discussion about how much protein you're supposed to eat on keto, because some proteins, amino acids, are more insulinogenic than others. And so again, in my book, The Keto Cure, we gave a top 10 list of the most insulinogenic proteins that you probably want to avoid when you're on a ketogenic diet. And so protein isn't just protein. You've got to look at the sources of the protein and finding those ones that are the least insulinogenic. And if you do those, then you're going to be a whole lot more keto than if you eat, say, chicken breast, which is highly, highly insulinogenic. You got to avoid those. So that also puts kind of a monkey wrench in this conversation about protein and how much is right on keto. My understanding is by expanding our protein sources, we ensure that we get adequate micronutrient supply. Yes, you're right again, Russ. Russ is on his A game today, so that is exactly right. And the micronutrition, I argue, is as important as getting these macronutrients right. I'm definitely doing keto for many health benefits. I'm super excited for progress weight-wise. Loved your book and what you're about. Thanks so much. Thank you, Einstein's Kitchen. All right. Looks like we're all proteined out. So the bottom line here on this Jimmy Rants, how much protein am I supposed to eat on keto is going to be up to you. You've got to tinker, you've got to test, and you've got to figure out what works for you. Use a glucometer, use how you feel as a huge marker in how much protein is right for you. And at the end of the day, never give up. You will find that happy medium. For me, I fall around 30 to 35 grams of carbohydrate, somewhere between 80 to 100 grams of protein. I don't really count my fat grams. I eat them to satiety. But most days I probably get somewhere around 125 to 150 grams of fat. So that's what's right for Jimmy Moore. Don't try to mimic that. that's not necessarily what's right for you, but it's what's right for me. So I hope this information helps you out. As always, head on over to jimmyrants.com. If you missed this live and you're watching on the replay and you want to watch others on replay, we've got them housed permanently now on YouTube. So thanks to all my YouTube followers for watching as well. And we'll see you again real soon with another Jimmy Rants. Bye.